Lisa, does this point matter in the grand scheme of things when Rebecca Ruud has already admitted to burning Lecky's remains? How does this factor into the timeline of the case at all?
Well, it appears to be when she was younger. And this had to do with her ex husband and stepmother and the need to report scratches on her. So she was aware of it. She did do the report. It was not when she was under her foster adopted mother's care. So, what is it showing? It's just showing that she is a troubled child. We also know that she had talked about suicide at least twice, and then she did hurt herself once. So it's just showing, setting up for more of what happened that day at home under the care of her biological mother that caused this situation to arise. And it's going to come down to that. Did she attempt to commit suicide by swallowing all of the Vicodin, and then the mother decided she's going to put her on the homemade burn pit, or did mom snap and decide that's enough? I can't do it anymore, and let's make it look like a suicide and get rid of my daughter.
Well, let me put this out there, Lisa. Could Rebecca Ruud share the same mental health issues as her daughter and went undiagnosed? Is it possible they could be genetically linked? And how could that make sense, if so, in this case?
Yeah, well, you would think they would use that as part of the defense if that was the goal to say that, go ahead and bring her mental health forward. And it would help the prosecution if they knew that she was not fit to be a mother. And we have a series of all of these events that happened in her life prior to that. And we're also talking to her mental health specialist and her psychologist, but none of that is coming forward. And certainly it could have helped, but not if she's hanging on to the story of I didn't do it. I found her dead and then put her on the burn pit. But we all know what would be the reason for that. You found your daughter dead, who had all these medical and mental health issues. What would be the reason for you to do that? Is she suffering from mental health issues as well? Because none of that makes sense. That's not what you do when you find a deceased family member. You call 911.
Well, with that being said, though, Lisa, what would compel someone from jail to come forward about another inmate if they claim there is nothing in it for them legally?
An opportunity to get out of jail and have some notoriety and be on the stand. And, because if they're not getting some kind of deal or some type of cooperation with their own case, what else would it be? What would be the incentive or a moral obligation? I mean, just because you're in prison and you make some mistakes, it doesn't mean that that is representative of your entire character. So each witness would need to be looked at individually. One of the witnesses, they tried to say, didn't you say that you were honest? Well, you're in jail for fraud. Didn't you also say X, Y, and Z? And then tried to just tear down the credibility of these. But having three come forward, and I'm listening to this testimony as well, there are ways to pick through it. I mean, all the way from I crushed up the pills and I put it in Kool-Aid. Does she drink Kool-Aid? We'll never have an opportunity to talk to her because Rebecca Root is not going to take the stand. But there are things that stand out to me that seem very specific, and it has a modicum of authenticity in my opinion.
Lisa, what is the most damning evidence that you have heard thus far in this case?
Um, Probably, I think when Pete took the stand, there was a little bit of information regarding that because we also know that her husband is also going to be charged. And we all know that people take the stand against their loved one for self-preservation. The fact that they got married that day, and the fact that we do have a witness in jail who came forward and said, "We got married so he couldn't testify against me." So I think that's pretty damning. It's not putting any of the blame on her husband. It's saying, so he can't testify against me. So that I think is pretty damning.
Also, Lisa, do you think the defendant's audio recording from the beginning of the state's case holds more weight than some jailhouse informant?
Well, I do. These are her own words, not to say that she wasn't lying when she was talking to the public defender, but the fact that she said, I put my child, my daughter, on the burn pit after I found her dead. So she either found her dead and that happened, but we do know she did that. So some of the jailhouse informants, this one specifically, Sarah, who came forward and said, I don't believe it was my daughter. She was lying to the jailhouse cellmate and saying, I don't think it was her. The DNA doesn't match 99.9%. But in her own words and her own statement to her public defender, she said she did put the body on the burn pit.
See what happens next. Closing arguments expected to come soon momentarily, but we have to take a quick break here on Law and Crime. But like I said, stay tuned as we continue to recap our trial out of Ozark County, Missouri, as we also await to go back in court. You're watching Law and Crime.